Envoyez.
John Winfred Dickson was born in Henryville, Indiana on October 2, 1920. His father, Albert, was the principal of the Henryville High School. His mother, Lena Shanks Dickson, soon left teaching to concentrate all her efforts on raising their 8 children. Henryville was a small, rural town in southern Indiana farm country. John grew up in simple surroundings with educated parents who expected him to live up to his potential. By any measure, he did just that. His early playmates included his older brother George, older sister Mary, and younger sister Eleanor, along with cousins and friends that would visit from surrounding farms. Dorothy recalled, "Eleanor and John were 18 months apart and were pretty good buddies. One summer, after a heavy rain, Eleanor and John were exploring the creek and found a sled used for mixing cement, about 4 feet by 6 feet with a metal bottom, and decided it would make a wonderful sailboat. Eleanor climbed in and John shoved off. They passed our house, turned right at a larger branch of the creek, passed our neighbors, and made it to the rear of Dr. Elrod's property when it began to take on water. They grabbed some pussy willow limbs. John managed to pull himself and then pull Eleanor to safety. Their sailboat continued on down the creek." John had a wonderful singing voice. Our friends often asked who was singing when they heard him and realized the radio wasn't on. John had a country newspaper route which required driving around 100 miles. By the end of the route, he had read the entire newspaper while driving.
In Washington, Senate leaders were preparing today for an emergency session tomorrow in anticipation of a message from President Roosevelt asking for a declaration of war against Japan. And here are a few late bulletins. The United States Army issued an official statement this morning in Honolulu declaring enemy aircraft have been shot down. There was no description of the number of planes or their location. Governor Joseph B. Poindexter declared a state of emergency existed throughout the Hawaiian Islands. White House Secretary Steve Early said that the President was assembling all information as quickly as possible and will present it to Congress in an informative report, probably in the form of a message to a joint session. The attack was launched at the very moment Japanese peace envoys in Washington sought to continue peace conversations with this country.
This is the beginning of a routine flight of Army training planes. These cadets are learning fast and will soon be full-fledged flying members of the Army Air Corps. Any young man between the ages of 17 and 26 can enlist in the Army as an aviation cadet for training as a pilot, navigator, or bombardier. Here's a chance to get a ringside seat, or better still, a bird's eye view of the big fight. A chance to help the Army Air Forces throw a punch that'll knock Hitler and Tojo bow-legged. Those 18 or over can go into training immediately. Inquire at the box office on your way out of this theater for complete information. This is an opportunity that eligible young men should not neglect. So remember that number, boys. 607 Custom House, Philadelphia, PA.
John always wanted to learn to fly. He tried to get into the Army Air Force, but did not weigh enough for his height. He decided to give it another try. He went to the store and bought 10 pounds of bananas, then drove to the recruitment office, sat out front, and ate as much as he could. He hurried in and asked to be weighed immediately. This time he was 1 pound over the 140-pound requirement. John wrote to Eleanor, "I was up chasing clouds today. They were about from 3,000 feet to 10,000 feet high. I'd fly above them for a while and then come down through to see where I was. When you're up about 10,000 feet and a certain weather condition prevails, there are white streamers that rush back from your wingtips for several miles. They look like streams of white smoke. When you have 4 or 5 planes dogfighting in the sky is crisscrossed with them.
You're getting ready to go up in the 47. And as a part of your regular procedure, you make an exterior check of the airplane, reporting anything that doesn't look just right to your crew chief, who's your team partner.
Running swell. All right with me?
All right, Lieutenant. Clockwise check. Gas selector on main.
Trim tabs in takeoff position. Flaps up. Landing gear down and locked. Oil and intercooler shutters checked for open. Turbo closed. Track your throttle 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. Prop lever full forward. Mixture control and idle cutoff. Generator switch on. Prop control switch in automatic. Mags off. Battery off. Cage your flight instruments. Cowl flaps open. Radio off. Tail wheel unlocked. When you've made your clockwise check, you've covered your checklist. But you want to look at your list whenever you're in doubt, and also to check your limits.
Clear? Clear.
Mags on both. Battery on. All right, primer. 2 strokes is enough in this heat. About 15 seconds on your Energizer. Hold it till she whines.
Clear? Clear.
Engage.
Radio on. Idle around 900. Anywhere between 800 and 1,000. Check your oil pressure and temperature.
Army 8283 to Pine Couple Tower. Standing by hangar 3 for taxiing instructions. Over.
Pine Castle Tower to Army 8283. Okay to taxi.
You'll come to know that the position of your wheels is just under your inboard guns. Good thing to know if you're ever running close to the edge. You're taking it easy on the brakes. You're playing with them, not tramping on them. With mags and flap equalizer checked, we're ready to call the tower.
Army 8283 to Pine Couple Tower. Ready for takeoff. Over.
Pine Castle Tower to Army 8283. Okay to take off on number 4.
Like a kid crossing the street, you look up and down that runway. Tail wheel forward to lock. Clear your engine. Here we go for a good one. Throttle forward with a steady positive motion. You're flying your 47 down the runway. You're not taking for granted that you're going to stay in the groove just because the tail wheel's locked. Keep to the center.
The deal is all wrapped up, but still General Kepner, fighter commander, must check before he gives the final okay that releases the whole complex machinery of another attack. The order clatters over the printer at the base of the 56th Fighter Group. The same ramrod order reaches the Group Ops room. And gasoline may make the difference between success and failure of this mission. 90 seconds is your margin for error at the rendezvous point. Two officers prepare the maps for briefing the pilots who will fly to Emden. In this room, the attack order that began at Bomber Command completes its journey. Out around the field, the ground crews put on the belly tanks that the Thunderbolts will need today to do their job. Two things these fighters can do better than any Hun. They can dish it out, and they can take it. And they have to do plenty of both. The 50 or more pilots who will go out today in Thunderbolts arrive at the briefing shack on battered bicycles and some in the always reliable Jeep. If it weren't for the bikes and the Jeeps, you'd have to spend half of each day just walking between the places you have to go on the average fighter station in Britain. 50 or more pilots for the day's job file into the briefing hut, and there they sit down. The CO comes in, and the briefing begins.
Well, here it is. The big friends are pasting Emden today. The 4th Fighter Group covers the tail of our task force, and there should be over 100 of them. Take off 1449 to 1458. Set course 1503 at 3.
On the back of his hand, each pilot writes down the dope on the day's job. And now back to the CO again. This moment is dramatic in its tension and important. 4,000 men will be in the air on this ramrod to Emden. All 4,000 must be synchronized to the second. Okay, boys, good hunting. In England, as in Burma or in Italy, General Mud hangs to your feet. And like everything else in every army, the Jeep must carry twice the load it was designed to do. Pilots ride out to 54 planes. None of them know what lies ahead. And crew chiefs worship their planes and their pilots. And they always say, "Good luck, sir, see you later." 6 minutes after the first engine starts, the first squadron must begin to take off. Battle of Germany, a fighter's first, last, and only job is to protect the bomber. Thunderbolts must climb to high cover positions above the bomber. Climb slow and compact and then open up. Each squadron to its planned position.
Captain John Dickson, Combat Report, February 8, 1944. Time, 10:40 a.m. Conditions, 510 overcast at 6,000 feet. Visibility good. Location, northeast of St. Quentin, France. I was leading Barnshoe Yellow with Lieutenant Coulter, flying Yellow 2. I observed one Me-109 flying about 2,000 feet below me at 2 o'clock. I went down and closed to 300 yards. The Me-109 started a gentle turn to the right, and I fired at about 200 yards with a 10-degree deflection. Strikes were observed on the right wing and fuselage. The Me-109 slowly rolled over and went straight down, smoking, at an estimated airspeed of 300 miles per hour at 8,000 feet. The EA disappeared into the cloud layer at 6,000 feet, still going down in a vertical dive.
Hurry, because gas is low. taxis to its own hard standing, widely dispersed around the field. The jeeps that took the pilots to their planes now take them back to the interrogation. A pretty happy bunch. They got 4 runs and lost none of their own planes today. Bottoms up, the hunting was good. At an 8th Air Force fighter base on the invasion coast of England, the commander of a combat wing pins DFCs on Thunderbolt pilots. They won those medals in the Battle of Germany, escorting our bombers to their targets.
Captain Dickson volunteered to join his commander, Major Ross, on the squadron's first dive bombing and strafing mission of the war. Their first target involved dive bombing the airfield at Gale, France. Then they were to strafe the airfields at Rennes and Saint-Jacques. Their dive bombing actions were effective at Gale, hitting hangars, buildings, runways, and machine shops. But while on their strafing runs at Saint-Jacques, they encountered heavy return fire. Major Ross crashed and was killed. Captain Dickson's P-47 took a direct hit from flak and went down. A 3rd American pilot was hit and lost as well. Albert recalled, "Today, the 22nd of April, I was planting potatoes when Mom came down to where I was working and told me she had just received a telephone message that our son John is missing in action over France. Only last week we had received a letter from his general stating that he had presented him an oak leaf cluster to his air medal. The general's letter said John was such a good boy and that his parents should be proud of him. We were always proud of him. When John wanted to fly the Air Corps, I could not advise him against it. He wanted to fly. I have a picture of his leaving for the last time. He drove his car. We were all out under the maple tree to see him off. We tried to look cheerful to the last. John's last look at any of the family was for his mother. John was so full of life and confidence and always cheerful. He lived the best he knew and did his work with a willing heart. No boy was ever kinder to his parents than John."
C'est ouvert. Donc, voilà. Lorsque j'avais 9 ans, c'est ici que j'ai vu le corps du lieutenant Quinn. Cette vision est restée gravée dans ma mémoire. Jamais je ne l'ai oubliée. J'ai entrepris des recherches pour savoir quelle était l'identité de ce pilote. J'ai reçu le dossier du lieutenant Russell de Queen. J'ai donc ensuite entrepris les recherches pour retrouver sa famille. Les familles, souvent, pensent que 50 ans, 60 ans après, on a tous oublié les drames vécus par toutes ces familles. Et elle a perdu également, cette 8e Air Force, plus de 26 000 morts et 47 000 blessés. Rendez-vous compte un peu le nombre de victimes que cela représente pour une seule unité qui était la 8e Air Force.
Antoinette Galbrun remembered. I was born in December 1928. I grew up with my 2 brothers and my sister Marie on the Tilley farm, which no longer exists today. That's when Captain Dickson crashed, the terrible event I witnessed. We settled in this farm of Tilley in Chartres de Bretagne, an old manor, which will disappear with the establishment of the citron plant. When the war broke out, I was 11 years old. From 1942, we lived in fear of bombings. This April 11th, 1944, it was very beautiful. The family was busy planting potatoes. At the farm, everyone had eaten snacks outside. When we heard the bullets whistle, my mom asked us to come back. He was flying very low. He arrived with such a crash that we wonder where he was going to fall. It was 4:30 p.m. when the crash occurred. Captain Dickson fell 3 or 4 yards from my sister at the end of the farmyard. She was on one side of a pit, he was on the other. The parachute of the pilot did not open in time. At very high speed, it hit one of the trees that bordered the driveway leading to the house. We ran, but the poor man was dead on the spot and very damaged. He fell before the plane that crashed about 30 meters away. When it exploded, my sister remembered it burned. I do not know where his helmet went. When I saw some pictures, I immediately recognized his mustache. 2 Germans arrived very quickly after the end of the alert. They went straight to the plane. My father told them where the body was. They saluted him. Then, an ambulance came to pick him up. Somebody told us he was a captain. In the following days, the debris of the plane was removed. We found the first aid kit a month later, humid outside and dry inside. It had fallen about 50 meters before him. There were bands, compresses, little splints, and 2 pairs of scissors. We used the gas compresses to treat the wounds of my mother. On the other hand, I kept the scissors. My son has lost one, and the other will be given to the family on Saturday. When the Germans began fortifying their positions around the airfield, they forced the citizens of St. Jacques to remove the steeple of their church, so their anti-aircraft guns would have a clear sweep of the horizon. It has not been replaced, in part to serve as a reminder of the dark times endured under Nazi occupation. As a small boy, the German soldiers paid little attention to Monsieur, as he walked through the construction to and from school every day. But as the gun emplacements were finalized, and the support buildings were completed, the sharp eyes and keen memory of that little boy were quietly working in an attempt to topple it all. Risking certain death if discovered, he was secretly recording each position on a hand-drawn map in hopes to provide the French resistance with the information that would assist the Allies during the hoped-for invasion that would free him and his family from from the Nazi enslavement. In 2005 to 2006, Jean-Paul Favre began the project to honor the memory of Captain Dickson. But it wasn't until 2009 that he was able to contact members of the Dickson family. Arrangements and planning in the city of Chartres de Bretagne began in earnest in 2010. A team of volunteers, led by Raymond Filot, were brought together with the full support of the city and regional government, led by Mayor Philippe Bonin and his office. Every detail needed attention, and as ideas became reality, more ideas were realized, until the plan became a 3-day remembrance and celebration, filling every possible hour with activities that embraced the entire region. Six Dickson family members traveled from America to join in honoring the memory of their Uncle John. Excited and apprehensive, they were completely unprepared for the overwhelming hospitality, friendship, and expressions of appreciation they encountered. Comfy hotel rooms, wonderful meals, prompt transportation, kindly translators, attentive paparazzi, and a packed agenda soon spoiled the visitors beyond their dreams. It was a gloriously beautiful spring morning as the distinguished members of the Honor Guard began to quietly gather at the Chartres de Bretagne City Hall. Dignitaries with their military medals of valor displayed proudly on their uniform or blazer spoke quietly with one another in French murmurs, knowing the weight of the moment and what part they will soon play in the coming ceremonies. The American visitors gathered silently out of the limelight, taking in every moment of the rare delight of color and choreographed motion that unfolded around them. Looking on with the awe and fascination of children wondering for the first time at a firework display or a rushing waterfall, but with an adult's composure, looking intently, but under an austere demeanor so as not to roar uncontrollably with delight.
Quelqu'un même, il restera fidèle à la parole. Mon Père nous aimera, nous viendrons chez lui, nous irons demeurer près de lui. Celui qui ne m'aime pas ne restera pas fidèle à la parole. Or, la parole que vous entendez, elle n'est pas de moi, elle est du Père qui m'a envoyé. Je vous dis tout cela pendant que je demeure encore avec vous. Mais le défenseur, l'Esprit Saint, que le Père enverra en mon nom, lui, nous enseignera tout. Il vous fera souvenir de tout ce que je vous ai dit. C'est la paix que je vous laisse. C'est ma paix que je vous donne. Ce n'est pas la manière du monde que je vous la donne.
The standard bearers, honor guard, guests, and citizens of Chartres de Bretagne filed out of the church into the brilliant sunshine and gathered around the memorial for the dead in the front by the avenue. Already gathered there in formation were French soldiers, members of the Rennes Fire Department, the MVCG dressed in World War II period uniforms, a drummer and bugler, along with the dignitaries who would speak. One by one, the speeches were presented with solemn dignity to a quiet and attentive crowd. The gravity of the words upon those in attendance could be felt by the American visitors, even though the French words could not be understood. They would be explained later by the patient translators who were provided as part of the thoughtful planning done by Raymond and his team. Captain John W. Dickson's name would be added to the memorial in front of the church where the fallen heroes from the area are honored. Each of John's nieces, one by one, would place a bouquet of flowers at the site in remembrance for John and the other brave souls that sacrificed their lives in defense of their country. The parade that led from the church wound through the city for about a mile and culminated within a beautiful square. The local citizens and parade participants gathered around a microphone stand that was set up in the center of the square. The Americans joined the crowd who had arrived from the church with a more festive nature. More animation, conversation, and excitement among everyone. The sun had seemed to become even brighter against the cloudless blue sky and must have beckoned everyone to lighter spirits. The young people were given a chance to express their thoughts, composed during school assignments specifically intended for this dedication. A famous poetess from the region read her poem to an appreciative and adoring crowd. John's niece Karen moved to the perimeter of the square with Philippe Bonin and Robert J. Tate. There, they looked up at a street lamp that had a small American flag stiffly attached about halfway up. As everyone gathered around the street lamp, the American flag was pulled away to reveal a sign with the new name for the square. There was an immediate chorus of approval and applause. With the gentle assistance of the mayor, John's niece Denise used her best French to read a note of gratitude to the citizens of Chartres de Bretagne on behalf of the Dickson family. John Dickson from the small town of Henryville, Indiana, heeded his country's call in its grave hour of need. He volunteered for action that he knew was dangerous, but proceeded anyway, in part because it was his duty, but mostly because it was how Albert and Lena had raised him. He lost his life thousands of miles from home in a heroic act defending freedom and democracy. he never met the people he was attempting to free from Nazi oppression and enslavement. He never met his nieces either. His sacrifice was not forgotten, though. He reached out across the vast distance in miles and in time to join some of the people who benefited from the ultimate victory, of which John was an important part. People from his family and people of his new family in Chartres de Bretagne miraculously were brought together for a glorious few days of celebration and remembrance of Captain John Winfred Dickson.